Alright, I thought I would make a video because I've come up with a set of thoughts that summarize the philosophy of existence in a material world, at least, that'll explain why socialism and totalitarianism and neoliberalism and the whole Malthusian collapse enthusiasts, the ones who are like, we need to eat soybeans to save the planet and so on, suck. So I'll start with the first one. Just like nothing smaller than the total system can control it forever or perfectly, every living entity has to take from the external system or the bigger or greater external system into itself to survive. Consumption or eating or whatever you want to call it. Other living things are part of the greater external system to any given life form. The only question is the source. In a notice, like whether it's like a certain animal or a different animal or a plant or the earth itself or something like that. The first life forms consumed chemicals readily available. This morphed into plants or their ancestors, like algae or something, and then animals that eat the plants, and then animals that eat the animals. And also some animals that can do both, eat plants and animals, and tend to need both, or to at least eat animals to survive. Humans are that last group. Zero sum and absolute scale are both in play. Absolute scale is important for those who want prosperity. Zero sum is to protect against predators. And then we have the parasites that want to zero sum reduce absolute scale for everyone else but themselves. Okay, that should basically evolutionarily or biologically foundationally describe imperialism, socialism, capitalism, free markets, economy, and why charity is best. If I didn't explain charity, then charity is when you even up zero sum and add absolute scale to another person or something for right now so that they can potentially help you or others you care about in the future. In terms of evolutionary logic or something like that. Now I'm gonna add another part that I didn't put in the words, but this was my based on my text, my tweets, in a very sort of strict survival of the fittest kind of way, which is you can also do charity to feel good about yourself for being a provider and gain status so other people will trust you because there's a cooperative element to humanity as well. But it's rooted in cooperation with others so you can outcompete a bigger group or the world or nature in general and so on. Sacrifice is giving something to get something more or better. Waste is when you give up something to get something trashy or crappy or less things. Equivalent exchange is when you value what you gave, same as what you got. Prosperity is literally built on sacrifice, whether it's trade, charity, plunder, investment, or work. A job is sacrificing time and effort to get money as a medium of exchange for other people's goods and services. Something for nothing is basically leeching on a fundamental level. Now, there's a caveat with this, which is the whole giving to people who need it, who can't pay anyone else back and thing, and the importance of the value of human dignity as a human, whether they can help or not, to a certain extent. And I will also add what I said in this one, which is, yes, I'm on disability welfare. No, I don't enjoy not working. Yes, I have a plan to earn money in the future. And no, I don't mind welfare existing. Also, what I say is, I couldn't care less if I don't own the means of production as long as I get a valuable reward for my efforts. The problem is, if it's beyond most people, like family businesses or small companies, then there's no competition, which is the only thing that keeps the people paying for work honest when they own the means of production. And I add another layer of this, which is a system of controls that relies on the controlling party to determine what's good for people to keep people honest will always fail, whether socialism or totalitarianism or neoliberalism, because fundamentally they don't understand the concept of competition and self-defense and its value in keeping people honest. And I'll add another thing, which is self-defense and hunting. I don't care if the Second Amendment doesn't actually list that out, like, particularly, because the point of it is hunting for food and self-defense are things that literally every single animal in the world has always relied on themselves being able to do, basically, except the offspring, like children or infants or younglings or something like that, when the parents are feeding them, basically. Every adult entity that exists that is not a plant, even plants have the ability to look for food, hunt, basically, for food, or defend themselves. And you look at spicy peppers and stuff, and basically, even though we eat them for fun, that's chemical warfare to defend itself against bugs eating them and so on. It just doesn't work against us. But at the same time, we cultivate them on purpose and protect them and give them nutrients and food, farming that is, so that we can grow them more than they would naturally grow in the wild for our consumption. So there's more pepper plants than would naturally exist in nature without humans, because we help them grow so we could eat them more, basically. And then finally, what I say is fundamentally a network with independently safe nodes with limiting or no impact from other nodes. And I want to emphasize limiting, not no. But at the same time, if there's no impact from one node to another, if that one node fails, then the other one's afloat just fine. And if it's limiting, then it might take a small hit, but it won't take a big hit or something like that, basically. And um, if my neighbor goes broke and I don't give him money, then that's no impact. But if I give him a little bit of money to get by for the month, then that would be like a limiting impact on me. So that's what the charity thing is, and so on. You can see how it can go back and forth, and you can. I mentioned the advantages of just giving charitably for status, and so on as well, and so on. But basically, limiting or no impact from other nodes safeguards total system collapse, and honestly, failure is the best teacher. Nothing wins forever in this world. So, a total unified system like socialism or the EU or one world government or something like that, that assumes too big to fail status as an idea, just lets detritus or deadwood style debris systemically or situationally or something like that build up for a metaphorical firestorm that consumes the entire system and everyone in it, basically. So basically, the point is free markets are a form of prevention of the collapse of society and civilization. And one world government versus multiple national governments is a problem, because multiple nations independent of each other guarantees that if a society fails, then they can learn from the experiments of other people, but also the other systems will be afloat independently, so they can offer a little bit of charity again if they wish to, and so on. And finally, another note, while I definitely believe in charity and I definitely believe in a basic welfare system and so on, there's a certain element of truth to the idea of learned helplessness or entitlement amongst people who get welfare and so on. Now, the element of learned helplessness is that you try to get a job and work and some or something like that, and you just can't do it for long enough, and you grow exhausted of trying and failing, and you just give up basically. Obviously, we don't want more people on welfare. We want less people on welfare, or at least if they're on welfare, contributing a little bit to society and so on. Maybe doing a small job or something that they can actually handle, but it gets them a little bit of that good feeling of, I did a job and it helped people and I got something out of it. You know, like that's kind of what work. That's why work does the soul good, because you're helping other people, but you're also getting something you want out of it too. Basically. Now the entitlement part is when some people, unfortunately, just assume because they exist, they deserve everything everyone else can give and take it all and as much as possible and so on. That's like the welfare queen thing and so on. So all of these factors are in play basically in different ways and so on, but I hope I've described the entire philosophy of Christian conservative capitalism, uh, or at least free markets, in a nutshell, and that violating these basic foundational principles, with the caveats or the sort of counter examples that I've provided not being taken into account, um, as well, means that society and civilization and communal well-being or collective well-being, as well as many individuals' well-being, which is what collective is supposed to mean, typically speaking, um, tanks or just drops to near nothing and so on. And the surest way to make society fall apart is essentially by taking things away from people that they worked hard for and got naturally, for some sort of give it to other people kind of thing. People work for their own benefit, at like that's the primary reason, or for the people they care about directly's well-being, and taking everything but the barest minimum from them and preventing them from going work harder, work smarter, line go up for themselves, for their contributions in prosperity, um, sabotages the entire principle of work and the whole point of sacrifice, which is time and effort, for more things gained out of it than you put into it. And when you take and take and take higher amounts of stuff, it stops being a matter of proper taxation to give basic needs to the poor and starts being something about plundering the resources of everyone else to feed yourself, in a sort of bandit or raider or thief or tyrant or something like that kind of way. And the reason why I don't like neoliberalism or socialism, and I don't like the Malthusians either, um, is because all three mechanisms, and also anyone that's colonizing the West from the third world on welfare, and the ones taking the Western teenagers' jobs basically away from them, and the low-skilled Westerners jobs. And I don't like imperialism from the West to the Third World either, is because it's all four, five, six of those things I mentioned. I can't remember if it was five or six um, that I listed just now, are basically forms of parasitism or being parasites. Now, I do agree that it's unfortunate that people are disabled and stuff, or they're in between jobs and so on. And part of the safety net should exist for people like that. And it shouldn't be like pure torture to be on disability. It should be reasonably comfortable. I'm willing to bet, but it should be like a very stringent requirement to be on disability. But it should be reasonably comfortable on some level. And the reason why I want basic welfare for people in between jobs is because lots of people go without work for a while due to bad economies and mismanagement and so on. Or maybe their particular availability of jobs in their region is relatively low for various reasons and so on. So a little bit of a safety net so they can at least keep going for a little bit extra. If they can't save up enough money on minimum wage, for instance, to carry on to the next job otherwise, keeps them from starving to death and so on. I don't know how food stamps work versus welfare versus disability in the USA, but in Canada, it's just welfare or disability or something like that. I prefer the Canadian system. I know the Canadian system, and so on. But the rest of these principles, keep them in mind and follow them more or less with the caveats or the counterexamples I've given and so on. And then the people on welfare will become much less of a problem, and so on. And my formulation for minimum wage, disability, and welfare is that disability should be approximately 2/3 of minimum wage, and welfare should be about 60% of minimum wage, or 2/3 of disability. That's what worked 15 years ago quite well. If you manage the rest of the economy with these principles that I mentioned in mind, then the society will do well enough where the people on welfare or disability won't tank the system. It'll be minimal, and if you add a little bit of money that a disability person can earn, say the extra 1/3, or sorry, disability should be 3/4 minimum wage. Welfare should be about 60 to 2/3% or 66% of minimum wage, and rent should be about half minimum wage, or 40% minimum wage, or something like that. That model will basically ensure, if you can hit those marks and you're smart about it, and you're not socialist about it, then you get a very good society that works really well, and no one's suffering big time necessarily, except like the very tiniest fraction ever, and at the same time everyone else is doing really well, and so on. So it's about maximum well-being for everyone without dropping anyone off the edge of the earth or a cliff or something like that. That's my model for it. It worked in the past. We've moved to the socialist direction from it, and that's a problem big time, and the reason why everything's failing, as well as neoliberalism. The solution may, at the edge of disaster, the welfare state might have to disappear. We might have to give up the welfare state and just do charity to keep people fed while they're homeless, at the worst case scenario, to make up for the lack of productivity and resources that socialism brought upon and rebuild society and so on. But my goal in trying to make these kinds of videos and suggest things and so on is to prevent the worst case scenario, but kind of bring things back a little bit to common sense and the bare bones foundations, at least, before we need to give up the fairly desirable brother's keeper kind of stuff that is technically not necessary for society to get by. So I'm not saying I don't like welfare. I do like welfare. I do like disability when it's basic. You might think I'm giving it too generous a cut of the size of minimum wage, but that's what was working in the past just fine. You do all these things in this video, and basically you have a just amazing society. And I know because I was living in it, basically. If you give like the extra quarter of minimum wage earning to disability in terms of like the ability to earn that much more money, then they can do small jobs or work 2 hours a day or 2 days a week or something, and like technically be part of the economy and contribute a little bit in the neat nooks and crannies that people don't normally want to do, who can work full time and so on. So it would be like regular people work 5 days a week and disabled people work 2 days a week or do newspaper routes or something like that, or the occasional yard work or something like that. And they eventually get about the same amount of money. And you do, in fact, claw back the money for disabled people's working beyond a certain point. So they don't earn more than minimum wage, or if they're working full time while disabled or something because they managed to find a job they can actually do that on, you claw it back seriously, maybe not 100% beyond minimum wage total. But yeah. But like I said, you audit people to see if they're still disabled, because it might be a long-term thing but not a permanent thing, and you kind of keep trimming the fraudsters out of the system, and eventually guarantee you'll catch them, and that way you keep the people on disability as low as possible without losing anyone who should be on it, generally, and everyone's covered, but everything's productive. And it's just a much better system than socialism, and a fairly better system than pure libertarian piece of bread to someone who's homeless charity systems as well. But it's much better than socialism. Yeah.